Hello and welcome back to PACHALKUP. I'm your host Manny, and today we've got a great legend in this industry. Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
I am doing well, Manny. How are you?
I'm good. Obviously, probably everyone that is listening knows who you are a bit because I do have quite a lot of listeners in Europe. If you just give us a little background on who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are.
Oh, how much time do you have? I am a strength and conditioning coach, basically business owner. I'm a writer. I speak. I do a lot of stuff. I've worked uh, quite a bit of time at Boston University, so my career, I guess, started there in the 1980s. I've been doing this for 43 years, I believe. This is my 43rd year working either at the collegiate level or at the professional level. I'm going to be 65 years old in a couple of months, so I'll be getting Social Security here in the old United States of America. Not really. I'm old enough to collect, but I probably won't start collecting yet. Uh, I've worked in Major League Baseball. I've worked in the National Hockey League. I've worked with the USOC, with our Olympic teams. Done quite a bit of stuff, I guess. And now I have a very thriving strength and conditioning business, but also an adult fitness business. I think. And the weird thing, our biggest growing clientele right now is probably middle school kids, sixth, seventh, eighth grade.
As a strength coach, we deal a lot with Excel's, spreadsheets, and building out the best program that we can for our athletes. Although, when you have these large amount of spreadsheets and Excels and printables and packs that you need to hand out to your athletes, it can get a little bit overwhelming, especially with large amount of files. Mine's personally has crashed, deleted, and that to me is a big burden. That's why since starting my own business, I've went with TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is an all-in-one programming software that has truly changed and leveled up the way I coach and the way I program for my athletes. With TeamBuildr, you can create customizable workouts, track your athletes' progress in real time, and even generate performance reports with just a few clicks. Athletes can also fill out their own workout data by using either the tablet or their smartphones in the weight room, which, most importantly, eliminates the paperwork that we all hate. This also gives your athletes accountability for their program and their progress as they are immersed within it. If you are interested in using TeamBuildr, head over to teambuildr.com and sign up using code PACHALKUP. That's PACHALKUP to start your 30-day free trial. So into that youth development area as well.
We're into a
Uh,
little bit of everything, really.
with you obviously having sort of pioneered a lot of this industry, who were the sort of people that you got mentored by, or some of the people that you looked up to in the industry while you were sort of going through it?
I was really, really lucky. I've told this story a bunch of times, but I went to Springfield College, which, if you are in the United States, it's widely regarded as one of the best physical education schools in probably in the world, really. We have a massive international alumni group. And my dorm director ended up being a guy named Mike Woysick. So, Mike Woysick, if you are a follower of American football, Mike Woysick has 6 Super Bowl rings as a strength and conditioning coach, which at one time he was tied with Tom Brady for the most Super Bowl rings of anybody in the National Football League. He had 3 with the Dallas Cowboys, probably early in the maybe 1990s, and then 3 with the New England Patriots in the 2000s. And he was my dorm director. He was my first real mentor. He was the first person that I really was able to talk to about strength and conditioning. He was a track thrower. He was a shot put discus thrower, and he was the graduate assistant track coach at Springfield College when I was there, and also the dorm director in our dorm. So I used to hang around in his dorm and read muscle magazines and talk about strength and conditioning for hours and hours and hours. The same time I was at Springfield College, another guy, Rusty Jones, who Rusty and Mike became the 2 longest tenured guys in the National Football League. They both were in the NFL for, I think, over 30 years. Rusty was also at Springfield during that time. And then we also had a guy, if you're a real student of strength and conditioning, you'll have come across a book called Strong Shall Survive, which was written by a guy named Bill Starr. It was probably the first good strength and conditioning book that was ever written. And Bill was the guy who coined the idea of the big three: squat, bench press, power clean. And our weight training instructor at Springfield College had just come from University of Hawaii, where he worked under Bill Starr. His name was Bruce Buckby. Excuse me. So I was very lucky to be at Springfield College. Yeah, there it is right there. I was lucky to be, and look at the price they're asking for.
Hmm.
$143 for that book. I I have the original. And so these guys were all at Springfield College, and where this was the 1970s. Now imagine this is 1977, 1978, 1979, and very much in if you read in Outliers, Gladwell talks about the idea of the Renaissance and the hothouse that was the Renaissance, and how so many great artists developed. And one of the things that he talked about is they developed because they were in this incredible kind of petri dish environment for the development of artists. That was Springfield College in the 1970s and 1980s. So I had uh, incredible opportunity to be around some really amazing people.
How does that sort of match up to your like national conferences and like these small conferences now where we spend like a weekend with each other? How do you think that compares to the experience you had at Springfield?
Oh, I don't think it compare at all, truthfully. I mean, it's better. I would say it's better than nothing. But the ability to be around people and to train with people, I was able to train with Mike's throwers, and so I went in. I don't know how many days a week they're working out. Then 3 or 4 days a week, I went with his throw group, and I was a 180 pound, whatever, not very good athlete, but I was a pretty good lifter of weights at that time. So there's a really big difference between consistent immersion and exposure. I think these weekend conferences, it's exposure, and hopefully you're getting exposed to the right people, and hopefully you're making good connections and continuing your exposure to the right people. But I wouldn't look at them as comparable situations at
Mhm.
all.
So then, how do you think that measures up with sort of these long-term internships that people get the opportunity to go where they're spending like 3 4 months at a time with each other and really developing,
That's
like
the way to
working with.
do it, but you have to be at the right place. So uh, I just got done doing a talk this Friday for my friend Vince Gabriel, who's got a kind of marketing mastermind group. And one of the things that I said is I'm a really big believer in cheating. I really think that cheating should be taught in school because it's the ultimate skill when you get out. And we call it networking and we call it internships and all that stuff. But what are you doing? You're going and looking at somebody else's paper, hopefully.
Program.
But the difference is you can't cheat off dumb people. So I think part of our problem is we have too many people in our industry who aren't good at filtering information, and they see the wrong people. Now the big trend because of Instagram is if you look good doing the exercise, then you're probably a good coach. And that's a really bad measuring stick to me.
Hmm.
So just because you can dunk a basketball, or you can jump, or you can do a particular exercise, that does not mean that you know something. It only means that you have the requisite athletic ability to do that exercise and do it for videos. But we're so visually driven now
Hmm.
that it's almost like the visual stimuli has shut our brains off.
100%, I agree. There's this saying in Portuguese, so I'm Portuguese, and it's you can learn something from everyone, even a dumb person. You can learn not to be them.
I
And
would agree. Yep. I always said, I say, some people teach you who you want to be, some people teach you who you don't want to be. But I think it would be a mistake to spend 6 months with someone who's teaching you who you don't want to be, or three
Mhm,
or 4 months or whatever it is. So I think if people are going to do internships, you need to do your homework and make sure you're going to go someplace. I would look at that internship and think, okay, where have the people that have been there gone? One of the things I can say, like if you look at our internship, the people are everywhere. They are all over collegiate sport, professional sport. We've placed people everywhere you could possibly place people. So I think our internship is really worthwhile. I could look
mhm.
at other internships and say, I don't know if these guys have placed anybody anywhere. So I don't know why you'd necessarily go spend time there. Maybe it's convenience. Maybe it's just you're not paying attention.
100%. And I was fortunate enough to be placed with Ron McKeefrey, and he's got his whole University of Ron McKeefrey, which I was glad enough to be a part of. And being from the UK, we don't really have these type of internships where we really learn about the industry, how it's developed, how like the business side of it as well. Like some internships that I've seen and taken part of, you're just like a worker bee. You're just doing the shitty jobs where no one really
Right.
is managing you and stuff. How?
Yeah, Ron's done a really good job with his stuff. He's done an excellent job in terms of being an educator. I think he takes that portion of his job really, really seriously, and I think that's really important. And I always think if you're taking a job to, like you said, to be a worker bee, to be a janitor, to clean up after somebody, then that's the wrong job. Our interns, they do get stuck with some shit jobs. I won't say they never do anything, but we really we place a huge amount of emphasis on educating them.
Mhm.
And
And to be fair, like I agree that we need to like I still clean the weight rack, I still clean the dumbbells, I turned the W's, like I still did all the worker bee stuff, but after which at lunchtime we got an hour in the classroom with Coach Mac or AJ or Ben Creamer or like any these guys who are have been in this industry as well.
that's what we try to do. We really put a premium on education, both in the classroom and on the floor. Our part of our internship is you work out 4 days a week, and you have to do our workout. You have to do the program. You have to become proficient at the program. You have to become proficient at the warm up. We really immerse the person in the process so that when they leave, they're prepared to go someplace and do something.
hmm I mean, my workouts have never been like what I did in America, and they've switched. Like I just work out the way that we were taught, and like from there as well. Like anytime I'm programming, I now have to do the program first myself, and then I give out. Like I refuse to hand something out that I've not personally done as well, and I think that's a great way to knowing when it starts sucking for your athlete. Like you need I would like to know when they're starting to be like, this fucking sucks. I am tired, to give you that little boost again, like motivational wise.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you need to. I'm amazed at the number of coaches that program stuff that they've never done and have no conception. I used to see it all the time in the conditioning world. I would see the conditioning that somebody wrote and think they've never done this. They obviously don't do conditioning themselves because they would realize that this is completely one stupid, but just not even doable.
Mm,
And then you've got people out there trying, really trying to do a program that probably never should have been written. It happens all the time. I mean, it seems like every year on Twitter, one of them will pop up, whether it's a conditioning one or a weight training one or whatever, where someone just writes some idiotic kind of 4 sets of 10 of 20 exercise program without ever thinking, even thinking how long we backtrack everything in terms of minutes.
mm-hmm.
We know how many minutes we're going to have in each area of the weight room, and we know
Yep.
what we can accomplish in that number of minutes. If this is a 5 minute block, okay, what can we get done in 5 minutes? If this is a 12-minute block, what can we get done in 12 minutes? And you have to start thinking about things like how long does the set take? How long does it take to change plates? How many people are going to be at each piece of equipment? We find for us, we can probably get about 6 sets done in 12 minutes. So we can get 3 sets done of two paired exercises in a 12-minute block. And that's a very realistic expectation for our athletes.
I think that's a brilliant point. I did a talk in Italy where I got one of the tasks that I assigned them was create a 1 hour program um, with sort of your main lifts, your accessories, and then some the conditioning style or core style workout at the end. I managed to get when I was obviously presenting, I did this like more exercises than them within a 45-minute window because I like what you're saying. I paired my exercises. I did double supersets, trisets, just to sort of minimize that time as well. In terms of the educational system that we sort of go through now in the S&C world, what are your views on the programs out there?
Um, I would say I think most of them are not very good. Truthfully, I think again I don't think enough people actually, as I said, sit down like you said. Do they? And it's not as much doing the program because again I
Mhm.
don't do the program anymore. I'm way too old. I physically am not all that capable of doing the program. But I don't think people look at it. They don't. I think you should pilot programs and look and think, okay, how long will this take? How difficult do I think this will be? I think there's a lot of things that we need to look at in that particular regard.
With the sort of development of the industry as it's progressed, how have you seen like the importance on athlete buy-in and these sort of big words in this industry?
I guess I look at athlete buy-in and think that that should be sort of assumed. I don't I feel like if you're a good coach, you shouldn't be worried about athlete buy-in. I've never, and I maybe that's just me. I've never not had athlete buy-in. I've never been in a situation where I looked at someone and thought, wow, they're really not kind of buying what I'm selling.
Mm,
So uh, I don't see that as a huge issue. And I think I would have to look at it and think if you're having a lot of problems with athlete buy in, you probably should look in the mirror a little bit more and figure out, okay, why am I having this issue with athlete buy in? What is happening in my coaching style or my programming style that's causing athletes to question whether or not I'm actually good at my job, because that's really what this kind of comes down to. When you look at this, you've got people looking at this and saying, okay, um are you good at your job?
mm,
Because if people aren't buying into what you're doing, then you're not good at your job. And maybe that means you're not good at selling your product, because in a way, particularly if you're getting into a new setting, yes, you're going to have to convince people that you do in fact know what you're doing. But if you're good, I've just felt like people I've never had that issue. So I can't I don't want to look at it, and maybe I've just been lucky. I'm not sure.
I mean, I think your body of works also speaks for itself.
But
With
I
in
say
term,
that, I mean, it didn't always though. I mean, I started out like everybody else started out, but I always got people to buy in, and I think some of it is if you're not, um,
like your
I think if you're
empathetic
not
soft
doing the right
skills.
thing, athletes know it.
Mm,
And so if you're looking at it, I think it's easy, blaming the athletes or they're not buying into what I want them to do. I think I might look at that and think, hmm, where is that problem? I think uh, I had a mentor of mine, a guy named Steve Belkin, who was a brilliant businessman, and he would always say when we talked about problems, he would be like, "Mike, what's your part in it?" And I
mm,
always remember thinking, "Wow, it's really like this guy. He was a brilliant, extremely successful business person, but he would always say." If there's a conflict, if there's a problem, you probably have a part in it, and you need to figure out what's my part in this. So, I guess my message, if it was coaches listening to this who was saying, "Hey, I'm really struggling with athlete buy-in," I would say, "Okay, what's your part in it? Why are you struggling with athlete buy-in? Why are you not?" We talk all the time about learning to kind of speak coach and learning to speak sport. So let's just say I get over to the UK and suddenly I'm tossed into the soccer world. Okay, I better be able to speak the language of that sport. I better understand the sport. And if I can't, I'm probably going to have a buy in problem. But I'm also going to have a buy in problem if I show up and I'm an American meathead who decides that everybody's going to do heavy back squats and heavy bench presses and heavy deadlifts. And you've got all these guys thinking, yeah, my back hurts. I don't feel so good. I don't really feel great when I go out on the pitch, and it's not a field anymore, right? Because it's a pitch.
mm,
And if you don't understand that, even, okay, culturally, the average soccer player is not going to be used to an American football strength training program. So even if you thought that an American football type strength training program was going to be best for this person, you would have to look at it and think maybe it's best for this person, but is there someplace better that I could start so that I could work my way kind of towards this programming that I believe is going to be really beneficial. I did that. I went into baseball, and I wouldn't even say I went into baseball and I knew that what I had done in other sports was not going to work in Major League Baseball. I'm
mm,
a big Olympic lifting fan. The majority of our athletes will do hang cleans. When I got to baseball, I knew right off the bat that was not going to work. That was not going to be a good decision. And I would think that it would kind of be similar in a soccer environment, that you get guys who generally were not brought up with weight training, maybe have not embraced weight training. Maybe some guys that are, again, I look at and think if a guy's playing at the Premier League level and he's never strength trained, that should tell you something about that guy. He got to the Premier League level without strength training. You should be able to look at that and be able to think, what does that tell me? When I got to Major League Baseball, one of the things when I started talking to guys about what I wanted them to do, I would always start with, hey, I understand you got here without me. I was not
right.
part of your journey. I'm just going to try to help you on your journey. I'm going to try to help you stay here. I'm going to try to help you make more money. But I know that you already got here. So whatever you did worked. And that may have been something, that may have been nothing, that may have been a mix of things, but you're here and now. And so I
Yeah.
think that's different than maybe being a high school strength coach, where you can walk into a high school and think, hey, these are maybe kids who want to just make the varsity team, want to be a starter, want to maybe play in college. Those people, that process of quote unquote selling is going to be different than it might be at the professional level. And I've seen people, I've talked about this a lot. I've seen people fail miserably at the professional level because they think they're going to come in and tell these guys how to do it. And I look at it, think it's incredibly bold of you as a strength and conditioning coach to look at someone who's already one of the best in the world at what they do and then tell them that, oh, if you listen to me, you're going to be a lot better. You might be like, if you listen to me, you might be a little better. If you listen to me, you might be able to extend your career a little bit, but you've probably been doing some stuff right up to this point that I should be acknowledging.
Hmm.
So that's, I think, the biggest thing with buy-in is looking and thinking, okay, what sport am I in? Am I working with males? Am I working with females? What's the level? You got to look at all that stuff and realize that it's not always going to be the same. It's not going to be a kind of a simple one size fits all sort of situation.
I think that's a good point where we sometimes think that we're solely responsible for where the athlete is or will be, but strength and conditioning isn't that. Like you can be a great lifter but be shit at your sport, or vice versa. You could be shit at the weight room and the best in the world. And I think us being a bit egotistic sometimes and thinking, and I've thought this myself some like a long, long time ago where I was like, I'm the reason that they're still playing, and I was completely wrong. But it's stepping away from that and being like, okay, that's maybe not the right way of thinking. Let me get back to what is important for their sport and what they do, and if that means limited time with me, that's cool with me. Where did your sort of thought process go when you're sort of talking to these athletes where you've not done the sport before or coached the sport before, but now you're sort of faced with them, and then how do you sort of achieve that
I think
relationship with your
Well, it
athletes?
was really interesting. What I did in baseball is I just started working helping the injured guys. We had a lot of guys. I was brought in because there was a lot of problems, and I was brought in the hope that I could fix some of these problems. One of the problems was a significant number of injuries. I believe the year I got to the Red Sox, my first year, we had 11 guys on the disabled list. So we had 11 injured
Mm.
guys to start the season, which was really high. When I think the roster, the max roster limit is 40 man, and we had 11 post surgical guys who would have been on our 40-man roster had they been healthy. And I just kind of tossed myself into that group of guys and said, "Hey, I'm going to help these guys to train, and I'm going to help these guys to rehab, and I'm going to integrate with the athletic trainers, and I'm going to integrate with the physical therapists, and I'm going to try to really help these guys get back." And I think I tell this story all the time, but uh, there's an Aesop's fable called Androcles and the Lion. And Androcles and the Lion is basically a story. Androcles is a slave who escapes in Rome. He escapes his masters in Rome, and he goes out and he hides out in the woods. And at one point, he's trying to hide. He's escaping from the Romans. He hides in a cave, and when he gets into the cave, he realizes he hears kind of this whimpering, howling in the back of the cave, and he creeps up to the back of the cave and he has this oh shit experience. He looks and he's like, shit, there's a lion in here with me. This isn't good. But he looks over at the lion and he realizes the lion is licking at its paw and licking at its paw, and it's really uncomfortable. And Androcles kind of crawls over and gets near the lion, and he realizes that the lion's got a huge thorn in his paw. And Androcles is like, okay, here goes nothing. And he yanks the thorn out. And the lion is just like, oh my God, like picks him up and licks him. And the lion then starts going out and hunting and bringing him back food. So Androcles is able to hide out in the cave for a while. But at some point, he gets captured. What did the Romans do at that time with captured runaway slaves? Fed them to the lions, right? So he's all of a sudden he's going to be sport for people, and he's out there, and they whip open the door, and the lion comes running out, and the lion runs out at Androcles and jumps up on him and puts his arms around him and licks his face. And Andrew Cleese realizes, oh shit, this is my lion. Like this, not only did they capture me, but they captured my lion, and they thought they were going to feed me to my lion, but this guy's not eating me. The Emperor sees this and thinks that Andrew Cleese is the greatest guy ever and pardons him, right? And
Nice.
and the story, the fable, because it's an Aesop's fable, right? So what they're trying to say is that sometimes that ability to take the thorn out of the lion's paw is what changes things for you. It changes your career.
Mm,
One of the things I always tell people is when you get into the pro sports world, you got to know who the fucking lions are. Okay, right? You got to know. Okay, these are the guys. These are the important people. They're hurt. I'm going to go over there and I'm going to take care of them. And when I take care of them, what I've found is that everything with everybody else got better because suddenly your respect level went through the roof because guys were talking about how much Mike helped them. Mike helped me with this. Mike helped me with that. I feel better because what I'm doing with Mike. Suddenly everybody wants to come in and work out with Mike because I went after a very specific kind of subgroup of people. And when you realize, in like I said, there was some lions in that group. There was some guys that were important pieces of the puzzle, and suddenly they like you and they're on your side. And next thing you know, everybody else is. So I think it's really really important to kind of understand basic human nature. And
mm,
I say this, probably get myself in trouble, but like you talked about, there's a huge amount of ego in our field. And I
100%.
think a lot of it stems from insecurity. People think, oh, I started lifting weights because I wanted to look better. Now look at me, look how strong I am. And what you realize is, particularly when you get to the highest level of sport, they could give a shit. They don't care if you're stronger than them. All they care about is, can you help me? Like I look at people, I always say, I am the least, maybe not the least likely, but one of the least likely looking strength and conditioning coaches that you're ever going to see, right? I'm a 65-year-old, basically bald, old guy with glasses. Not somebody, I always say, if you went to, or if we were in a facility working out, you would not walk up to me and ask me for advice if you didn't know me. You might ask 100 other strength coaches before you ever spoke to me because I don't look the part. And I think so we have to be really careful because that's a big thing now, looking the part, walking the
Mhm,
walk. And I was like, that's bullshit. You don't need to look the part. I mean, you can't be a slob. You can't look like you don't exercise, but you don't have to. I think sometimes looking like a big jacked up bodybuilder meathead, at least in the sports world, is probably more of a negative. Guys kind of look at you and
mhm,
think like, "Oh, look at this guy." Guys be like, "Yeah, you can't hit a fastball, right? You can't hit a 3 pointer, can't do whatever. Uh, just all he can do is lift weights." Whereas I think maybe you have a little more advantage. I really strive for our coaches to look athletic. I think looking athletic is really, really important.
100% agree. I am back to an earlier point that you made is this Instagram, TikTok era that we're in kind of promotes that. They look at these big juiced up people and they
Yep.
think, oh, I'm going to change my life because he's my coach. And some of one of my first coach, he was like 5'3". He looked athletic, like he'd played at a high level before. You'd never guess that he was a strength coach. And to exactly that point is like athletically built coaches are probably the best because they've got a little bit of it. They can lift and they have the knowledge to actually supplement a program that's going to be effective for their athletes.
Yeah. And they can, I want, like I always say, I want people that can move.
Mm,
So I want someone that can demonstrate all of our warm-ups. I want someone that can demonstrate our ladder drills. I want someone that can demonstrate our plows. I want someone that can demonstrate all our lifts. And very often strength coaches, quote unquote, can't do that.
hmm I'll tell you a
And
funny story on that.
go ahead.
Um, so and this is going back to the educational portion of our industry. My lecturers at university could not this is an S&C course, like specifically for S&C bachelors. Um, my two lecturers could not do Olympic weightlifting, and that's requirement for us to pass.
Hmm.
So they knew that I could do it. So me, a student in my bachelor's, was demonstrating the lifts to my class.
Yeah.
And
I mean, yeah, it's absurd. It's absurd that people are teaching a strength and conditioning course and can't, again, you should be like for me, I'm competent at least with an unloaded bar. I can show somebody the lifts. I can show somebody what I want them to do. I can't, at this stage of my career, perform those exercises anymore. Uh, that's I don't know. I that's a big thing for me. That's a big. No, it's like we started our course, our certified functional strength coach course, and one of the things that we did is we require that there's a practical component, which means you take the course, and at the end of the course, you will have to undergo a practical examination with one of the instructors where they're going to ask you 5 or 6 questions, and it might be to demonstrate some type of, and again, we use agility ladders. I know people can say, oh, he's not even a real coach if he uses agility ladders, but we use agility ladders. But it might be a situation where we say, okay, demonstrate a, whatever, what we'd call 1-2 stick, what some people call Icky shuffle, whatever it is, but demonstrate 1-2 stick, demonstrate a forward skip, whatever that kind of stuff is. And if you can't do it, you don't pass. It doesn't matter if you sat through the course and you understood the written material. If you can't do it, you don't pass. And we might say, okay, demonstrate a dumbbell row. And then we might ask you, okay, describe a progression and a regression for dumbbell row. Like that stuff's all in there because of exactly what you just talked about, is that there are people in the industry who can't. We go to seminars with people and realize there are personal trainers who can't skip. Can't skip
Skip
when you
like
start skip. Like you show the warm up and you say, okay, we're going to skip. And then you realize, you look and think, wow, this person's here. They're a personal trainer. They can't skip.
wow.
I will tell you that uh, happens all the time.
In all fairness, there was people in fourth year, and we'd been doing S&C for 3 years before that. I still couldn't do a front squat or a clean or a jerk or a back squat properly, and that terrified me. Truly, truly terrified me. Like
Yeah.
I understand, like not everyone's going to be able to move the same. Like I completely understand and get that, and I was a little bit fortunate that I was able to be in S&C program since I was 13. But I mean, if you're in a sports science course or a strength and conditioning course and you don't at least take part in lifting yourself, it's a little bit.
Yeah, and like I said, I think you should be, even if you might say, "Hey, I'm never going to use power cleans. I'm never going to use back squats. I'm never going to do a jerk." You should be able to. You should be competent in all of those
Mhm.
exercises. But it's interesting. We did this in a staff meeting not too long ago because we had people. We have coaches that work for us who said, I really can't teach a back squat because we never teach it. And we spent the
Mm.
staff meeting on teaching back squat. And I thought, they're right. This is, if they were to go anyplace else, someone would expect them to be able to do that. And we have coaches who've never done it. They've taught all variety of split squats and all these things that they've taught, but they've never taught the basics of the back squat. So, yeah, I just think that competence, regardless of weight, is important. So I don't
Mhm.
care. We have 15-pound bars, we have 25-pound bars, we have 35-pound bars for just that reason, because I want people to be able to just be proficient demonstrating the lifts. I don't really care about I don't know, the amount of weight they're moving.
Yeah. What's your sort of take on the whole science versus practical application in the field?
I think there's way too much science right now. Sorry, I'm moving because I need to get my charger too, because my
I told you.
computer is telling me that it's going to expire. But I think we've gone way too far on the science side lately, which I don't like. I'm not a fan. When I look at this, I think there's way too much force plate data and all this other stuff, and way too little from a competency standpoint. And so I think we've just got to be careful with the direction that we go. As I said, I think when we look at this and say to ourselves, okay, what do I want people to be able to do? Uh, Again, I don't want somebody who can't skip but knows how to use a force plate. Right? That's because I would look at that and think that is absolutely very clearly the cart far before the horse. So I think we're in the nerdification of strength and conditioning right now, where everybody is in love with the data
Hmm.
and VBT devices. Again, I don't think you need VBT. We're just beginning to play with VBT, and I'm starting to think that it has a place. For a while, I didn't think that it has a place. For a while, I thought I don't know if it really matters. I would say I've shifted my thought process on that a little bit, but I would also say that the average beginner needs to be much more focused on controlling the bar than they are on accelerating the bar. So I think there will come a time where I might look at you and say, okay, Manny, now we're going to worry about how fast you can move the bar,
Mm.
particularly in non-Olympic lifts, like in a non uh, explosive lift, because when you start trying to get people to move fast, when you're trying to get them to move slow, it's a problem. But I do believe when you've got stronger athletes, there is value in um, gamifying intent, and we've been playing around with that exact process, kind of the gamifying of intent
Hmm.
with, I would say, an intermediate to advanced lifter and looking and saying, all right, now I'm going to look at it and we're going to switch the metric. We might say, okay, I the load is going to remain the same, but the guy who moves that load the fastest is the person that we're going to recognize now, as a for instance. So we did that. We've been playing around with that with trap bar deadlift, and we actually have been back squatting because we have a bunch of college kids who have to back squat in college. So
Hmm.
if they have to back squat in college, then we back squat because I want them to be prepared for what their strength coach is going to make them do, even though it may not be what I'm going to make them do. But
Yeah.
what we've been playing with now is we have a Vitruve unit, which is a
Yep.
nice
Yeah.
little
I
unit,
remember.
and we're just focusing on, okay, who's going to give us the highest meters per second, as
Hmm.
opposed to who's going to lift the most weight. And I do think there's some value in that, but I think we just have to be careful that we don't forget about the basic technical aspects, that we don't forget about the interpersonal aspects in our pursuit of data. I had one
Hmm.
Major League Baseball strength coach tell me that he said, I have trouble getting my job done because I have to do weekly force plate testing on all of our players. And I think, why would you need weekly force plate testing? And why would you be doing weekly force plate testing on all of your players if it was legitimately detracting from training time? So I'm not getting my workouts done because I'm so busy getting the testing done that the front office wants to see. And then I would look at it and say, who in the front office has any idea what any of this data actually means? And is anyone in the front office actually looking at the data? And so that's kind of the direction. And then sometimes the data is not understandable to the player. That's another big drawback. For instance, our American players are used to vertical jumps not done on a force plate. Now, people say our force plate's more accurate. I get it. It's like DEXA scans are more accurate too for body fat, but our athletes are used to skin folds, so they're used to their body fat being 10%. When you do a DEXA scan and you tell them they're 18 or 19, they
Mm.
don't like that. They're pissed off, and they think this shit doesn't work. It's broken. It's much the same thing with the force plate. You've got guys. I vertical jump 36 inches. I get on the force plate. I do 24, and then somebody looks and the same thing. This thing's stupid. Why it doesn't even work? My vertical jump didn't go down a foot, and then you're trying to explain to them the physics behind what's actually happening, and they're not understanding. They're just mad at you. So I think we have to really be careful about how we place new technologies into the system, and then how we expose our athletes to those new technologies in a way that makes it palatable for them. And we've
Mm.
just done a shit job, an absolute shit job of that in the last decade.
So it's really going back to the basic of we're trying to do a bench before we do a press up, where press up's going to develop you a lot more, but this new fancier gadget, but bench press is sort of at the forefront of everyone's mind just now.
Right. Or we're worrying about VBT on the bench press with someone who can't bench press. And you
Mm.
look and think, okay, it's just, I think all these things are going to have a place at the table, but I think what we'll realize is the place was not as significant as the one we initially had thought it was
Mm.
going to.
Um, Thomas Newman has a brilliant sort of way of integrating VBT, and he said that he gets his athletes to squat double their body weight first. Once they can do that, it switches from that to then, okay, let's change that to 1 meter per second and add their body weight. If they can do that, then that's like the next progression to double their body weight in a squat. I know you don't particularly
Yeah,
enjoy
no,
the
and
box
that's
squat.
kind of what we're doing. So we got to the point where guys were about that. They were about at double body weight. And so as a for instance, so for my guys, it was 275 pounds for five. And then I started looking, well, we can either go to 285 and maybe grind out five more reps again, or we can start hooking up the Vitruve unit and just look at, like for us, just, what size. I think our highest was 0.68. And,
Mm.
and just looking in, now we have little contests where we're just yelling out The
Numbers.
state we're yelling out numbers, and guys are trying to beat each other's numbers, and it's funny. It immediately gamifies itself. Guys
Mm,
realize, okay, the rules changed. I have to play differently, and that's okay if you've got good lifters, as you said. Now they can handle twice. I don't know if I'd go back to body weight and try to get 1 meter second because I don't know. I still think the load matters, but
mhm,
I think at some point we chase that heavy, slow load way too long in
yep,
our field because that's what we want to do. We've always chased heavy, slow load. And again, but some people say, like you look at someone like me, I've gotten a lot of benefit from my athletes over the years with heavy, slow load. So I'm not in a huge hurry to totally dump that. But at the same time, I have to be willing to look at some of these. I don't want to be, I guess, I don't want to be totally anti technology,
mhm.
but what I want to be is,
Effective
I think,
technology.
yeah, in some ways I've always been good because I was an early adopter. And then I think in others, I've been good because I wasn't an early adopter. So I think
Mhm,
you've got to give some of this stuff time to flesh out a little bit and figure out, all right, is this actually going to be useful? And then if it's going to be useful, how do I make it useful?
one of my biggest things is, so I'm in the UK educational system for S&C and sports science is very sports science heavy. Like we learn a lot of data management, data points, the whole hurrah. In America, it's more of the coaching, more of the practical sense of it. So I'm a weird, like really good mix in the middle. But having had experience from America, I now look at my testing batteries and different tests that I run, and I think, okay, is how applicable is it, and how realistic is it to test, and what does it actually mean? Because I could just collect data to collect data, and that's cool. It makes cool graphs, good presentation points, sick.
Right, and
But
I always think that's what the US general manager is looking for now. Like I always joke in terms of if you want to get hired as a performance instructor in the United States, you need to have an accent and a degree that says sports science. If you have an accent and a degree in sports science, you're going to suddenly come in and get to be the boss. You may not know, you know, you may not know what the hockey puck looks like. You may not be able to talk. I have had people go into the NHL and suddenly be, I'm the director of performance, and I'm from Australia and I've never seen a hockey game, as a matter of fact. Don't really know how it's played. As you said, I know a lot about graphs and I know a lot about data. And our general manager, the whole Moneyball thing, has kind
mm,
of nerdified sports management in the United States too. So everybody wants to hire these really smart guys who went to Harvard or Yale or Stanford or one of these types of places. And so then these guys are obviously, because of their educational background, they're very enamored of data. And so what do they want to do? They want to bring in a guy who'll give them what they want. I want a guy to come in here who's going to give me data. He'll feed me this diet of data that I need that'll make me think that things are getting better when the reality is maybe things are getting worse. And I think what's happening here is things are getting worse. I think that sort of nerdification, data driven kind of thing is pushing things in the wrong direction. And eventually everybody's going to figure out, wow, I need a really good coach. I
mm,
need someone who's really good with people so that I can get somebody. I got all this data, but what's really important is the alteration of the data, right? I could have a lot of data that says, Manny, you're weak and slow. And if I said, yep, and every week I'm going to test you and you're going to be weak and slow, and you're not going to get any stronger and you're not going to get any faster because I'm not a very good strength coach, but I'll keep telling management that you're too weak and you're too slow. And eventually what they're going to do is they're going to realize I need to bring somebody in who can alter the data and not on the computer or not be able to go in and type numbers in and say, oh, I made all his numbers higher, but someone who can make you better. That's a coach. That's not a sports scientist. That's not a data analyst.
mhm.
So I hope the pendulum will swing back, but I'm fearful that it's continuing to go too far the other way.
Yeah, I think the European circuit is much more of the data driven side,
Mhm.
and they're lacking the interpersonal skills to actually coach.
Yeah, and
Like,
that's what's crazy, but that's the US is going that way. The US is pushing hard in that direction, which I think is incredibly short-sighted, but that's what's happening.
yeah, like I love talking to, and like I've mentioned this millions of times on this podcast. Like coaching, conscious coaching was the first ever S&C book that I read, and
And
that was
it's
back
not
in
an SEC book,
um
right?
yeah, it's a personal, like personal development and how to deal with people. Funnily enough,
Yeah,
but
that's
so
what's
that
funny about
was
it. And Brett has become internationally famous by writing an S&C book that's not about S&C. And it's funny, three of the chapters, and they were written by Mike Boyle, strength and conditioning guys. If you look at the chapters, it's interesting. Kyle Holland, Brandon Rarick, and I can't think who the third one is off the top of my head, but there's three guys in there that wrote chapters for that book. But it's yeah, it's really really interesting how he was able to kind of shift some of that focus back
mhm,
to coaching.
yeah,
Hopefully, it
and like
continues.
I was I was very fortunate enough to have stumbled on that book, and I think it was 2017, 18 that I read it. So it was like like he wasn't as big as he is now at all, and like it was to the point where I messaged him and he replied like straight away, and I was like, whoa. But essentially, it just like paved this way for me as a coach to be like, okay, let's look at who I actually have in the gym and let's manage that before and again, I didn't have the money to implement these tests or batteries of science driven data. So for me, I was just like, okay, let's look at your movement first. Let's, what do you like to do? What do you not like to do? Let's build that first, and then let's look at other things that we can explore.
Yeah, I mean that's how it should be, but we're
Um,
specializing in the cart before the horse in our field right now.
yeah. Do you think do you think you'll ever get to the point where people stop going off as much data as we are just now?
The pendulum always swings. It always goes back. It's the nature of the field. Back and forth, back and forth. I think some people will start to realize, wow, we've spending all this money, on force plates and data scientists and data analysts and all these things, but we're because ultimately what will matter is winning.
Mm,
Somebody somewhere along the way will win and think, "Oh, we really shifted our focus back to coaching and back to trying to get our players better, not simply because it's like I look at the data thing, like the force plate data. It's like consistently, like say I give you a test. All right, I'm going to give you a math test, and you fail, and then I say to you, Manny, we're going to next week we're going to take that math test again. I'm not going to teach you anything, but we're going to take that math test again, and I'm hoping you're going to do better next week. And then you take it next week and you're terrible. You do bad again. And then I think, next week after that, we're going to do the test again. You start looking at it thinking, no, maybe I need to bring in a tutor. Maybe I need to start studying for the test. I got to spend some time.
mm,
And where we're at right now, we're just in this loop of testing and testing and testing. But it's the training that causes the change. The testing only evaluates whether or not the training was effective. But we're very, very stuck right now on the testing part. But I do believe the pendulum will swing back.
yeah. With your sort of experience as an athletic trainer, how has that sort of shaped the way you look at athlete management and development?
Well, I think I had a much because you understand injury when you're an athletic trainer. So I think that really helps you as a strength coach because I think too many people I came at it from two sort of very separate points in terms of on one hand, I was a lifter, I was a power lifter, I was competing. And then on the other hand, I was seeing the people that were in the training room and what their problems were. And one of the things I realized from the athletic training room is that there's a whole lot of people who weren't made to lift weights. I was made to lift weights. I was gifted with a pretty good body for for powerlifting, for squat, bench press, deadlift. I was pretty good at that stuff relatively quickly. But I'd look at other people and think, not so much. And the interesting thing about it is sometimes the better athletes were not meant for lifting. And I wrote one time, what makes you a good athlete may make you a bad weightlifter in a lot of areas. So what the height that might make you a great basketball player or a great rower or a great left tackle in football or a lot of these other things will not make you good in the weight room. The people that are good in the weight room tend to be. I always think the people that want you to squat are squatty, right? You're short, you're squatty, and you think, oh, this is this. Everybody's going to get better if they just do this, and then they give you a 6'10" basketball player, and you start looking and thinking, maybe this guy maybe this isn't going to work as good for this guy as it did for me because of his particular body dimensions. And so I think we don't do a good job of kind of absorbing and analyzing that data
Hmm.
in our mind.
I think as well it's the whole that model that everyone wants to use in a book for squatting or for deadlifting. Like it has to look a particular way, very standardized, where humans aren't standard. Like
Right. And you just think, I have people all the time who people talk about, the West Side guys. They're the ones that drive me the most crazy. Really, because I look and think it is a powerlifting methodology that has been marginally proven on powerlifters. I don't even know if it's been proven if you take the drugs out, but it it may have worked for powerlifters. But that subgroup is not athletes. And there was an Exos guy, Dennis Logan, who had the best quote. I use it all the time in my presentation, but he said, "I want great athletes that are good weightlifters." And and I love that quote because that's what I want. I want great athletes. I want people that are great at their sport. We had great pitchers at the Boston Red Sox. We did not. We had one. John Lester was a really good weightlifter. All the rest of them were not really good weightlifters. All the rest of them, some of them were, a lot of them were kind of tall and lanky and didn't have really good lower body strength, didn't have really good lower body power, but they could still pitch
mm,
damn near 100 miles an hour. And I was very accepting of the fact I'm going to get them stronger in the safest way possible so they can continue to go out and demonstrate this skill that they have.
yeah, what's your sort of mentioning Olympic weightlifting? Like, what's your take on partials compared to like the whole lift?
We hang clean only. We've never gone off the floor in, I mean, not, I won't say never, but more than 30 years we haven't lifted off the floor. So I would say, I guess in that case I'm a partial guy because partials, if I put you above your knees, we're all pretty equal from the knees up
Hmm.
in terms of Olympic lifting. If I try to get the bar onto the floor, uh,
Your limb length it starts
yeah, limb
mattering.
length, because again, disc size is constant.
Hmm.
The diameter of that disc is consistently about 18 inches, if my memory serves me. And that's not going to matter whether I'm 6'10 or 4'10. That disc is still going to rest 18 inches. So basically about 9 inches to the center off the floor. That's the way that it's going to be. And that is a very unequal environment for a tall person and a
Yeah.
very beneficial environment for a short person. There's a reason when you think about Naim Suleimanov, one of the greatest weightlifters ever, he was under 5 feet tall, I think. And he was under 5 feet tall. It made his ability to maneuver around a 7 foot bar with 18-inch diameter plates was significantly different than somebody who was taller. That's just physics, right? It's physics and physical reality.
In terms of like injury management, you were sort of speaking about how you went into the Boston Red Sox and sort of dealt with them first. What were your sort of methods to analyze and really break down what was happening and sort of make changes to fit
But
the
you know what? It was much more taking care of the rest of them. So I would look at a guy and say, okay, this guy had surgery on his pitching arm, but 3 quarters of him is really good. So one of
Mhm,
the things I would do is get in there and figure out, okay, what's the workaround? How do I get this guy to train his lower body? How do I develop the core training exercises that this guy needs? How do I get him to train his uninjured limb? And then I'd let the athletic trainers do their job with the injury. Getting that other 3 quarters better than it ever was before meant that relatively quickly after that play came back, everything came back at a higher level because the
mhm,
body really loves symmetry. That's one thing if you look at kind of the cross transfer and cross education research in physical therapy, the body wants to be symmetrical. So if you take somebody that's injured and you really work hard on their uninjured side, the progress of their injured side is going to be more rapid as the body kind of seeks that
mhm.
symmetry and it experiences kind of neurological overflow. There's a lot of things that happen that are beneficial. So,
Yeah, I I always sort of talk about injuries as mitigating. You can't prevent injuries, but you can mitigate a lot of what's potentially going to happen. But a sort of theory that I've been working on for a while now is this ability to be able to bounce back quicker when you've had an injury if you've already done the work for it. So, say
yeah.
if you develop really good single leg strength, right? And really powerful and strong coming from a single leg or a single limb, you can then injure that limb, and then when you get surgery or recovery process after the injury, you can sort of come back a little bit stronger than you would have if you hadn't done all the prep work.
Mhm. I'd agree, and I said, I also think that if you train the uninjured limb really hard, you also I mean, the research is clear that you benefit, so I think it's that ability. So for us, one of the things we always talk about with our athletes, you can be hurt, but you're never not training.
Mm,
So we would even my son tore his ACL a couple years ago, and we were doing all our medicine ball drills sitting on a box. So while he was rehabbing, so he's doing seated chest passes and seated overhead throws and seated side throws. And we did boatloads of one leg squats and one leg straight leg deadlifts on his good leg. And we did all of our upper body training, and we did as much core training as we possibly could. We were thinking the rest of you does not have to deteriorate to the level of your injury.
mm,
So that was, I think, uh, it's the way it always should be. I don't understand that everybody doesn't do it, but
mm.
there's a lot of people that don't do it. I've seen it in the ACL world where people will actually say, "Don't train your uninjured leg, so you'll achieve symmetry faster."
Oh,
So effectively, they're saying go backwards
yeah,
to
to
give the
go.
appearance of equality, which is absurd to me.
Yeah,
But I have heard physical therapists and doctors espouse that theory.
wow.
Yeah.
I've
Wow.
I've
Right.
importance, and this is again on this point. I've learned the importance of single leg strength. It was a weightlifter, and she had done her ACL somehow, but she was so strong single leggedly that she could do her whole life because she had a good leg. So, like, say socks in the morning, she would sit on the floor, put her sock on, and because she had a really good solid strength on single legs, that she could just stand up from a piston squat. What's your sort of opinion on the ability to go off single legs and really be good single leggedly? Because again, this is coming from stuff that I've seen and heard in the
Well,
UK
I
of
mean,
stuff like this being very gimmicky, where you're just training one legged.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if we just train one-legged, but the vast majority of what we do is unilateral. I would say on an average, our average athlete probably does trap bar deadlifts, but all the rest of their strength work is going to be unilateral. Again, I'm a big unilateral proponent,
Hmm.
and I don't think that will ever change. I think you can see lots of examples of people who are strong on two legs and not on one. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many guys I've seen that could squat 500, 600 pounds, and then you throw them up on a box and ask them to do a one leg squat and they can't do it. So there's very little. The good thing is there's way more transfer from one legged to two than from two legged to one, because on in a unilateral stance there's lots of good things that are happening in your hips and pelvis that are beneficial to you that aren't happening in a bilateral stance, and as a result you don't have kind of the requisite stability to go with the strength. You're kind of like having a car with a really big engine. There's no shock absorbers underneath and there's no stabilizers underneath, but you've got the engine that can get that thing to, if you can go straight ahead and hold on to the steering wheel, you can get it to go 100 miles an hour. Just don't try to turn.
Mm.
And I think that's a lot of people in the strength world. But hey,
Yeah. What's your take on bucket filling, and how important is that for you in your program?
oh, I think I am the originator of the bucket filling idea. To be honest, I think I was probably the first person to use that analogy, and I say it. I can't tell you the number of times I say to people, "Fill the empty buckets." We talk about it constantly in terms of thinking about the training process as a series of buckets, and then looking at the buckets and saying. So again, the perfect example would be soccer in the UK, right? The fitness bucket, the endurance bucket is overflowing, and the
Hmm.
strength bucket is neglected, empty in the corner, right? The power bucket neglected, empty in the corner, and then somebody thinks, "Hey, let's go over and put some more shit in the fitness bucket." And you're kind of like, the fitness bucket overflowed last week, but that strength and power, those two buckets over there, they're empty. So why can't we go fill those? So I think looking at it as a bucket system and realizing one of the things I said I wrote an article. I think it was called "Have you filled a bucket?" I forget what I actually called the article, but basically it said, "Don't worry about who filled the bucket or how it got filled.
Just fill it.
Just worry about whether it's full or not. And if it's full, don't put any more stuff in it."
No, I kind of wanted to ask you because I have seen, and everyone mentions the bucket fill and Mike Boyle, so I kind of wanted you sort of break down what it was and how important you find that to be
Yeah.
developing athletes.
Yeah, I can't, it's funny, I should actually, uh, I'm gonna actually look up the title of that article real quick because I can't remember exactly, but I can find it in about 2 seconds. So I go to strengthcoach.com, and then I go to free articles, and then I type bucket in there. I'm gonna get it, and oh, it's just called filling buckets actually. So, yeah, and it was based on a children's book. Actually, it was based on a book that either my son or my daughter read in their elementary school. Because the basic idea was that they talked about it was more emotional buckets, and they basically said that you're either a bucket filler or a bucket dipper. You're either putting good stuff in your friends, your fellow students' buckets, or they would always say you're dipping their bucket. And the expression, my son would come home or my daughter, whoever it was, and said, they said that I dipped so and so's bucket, and that I took stuff out and I didn't put stuff in. And for whatever reason, it made me think of strength and conditioning and realize, yeah, that's us. We got a lot of bucket dippers and not enough bucket fillers.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you so much for coming on. It's great to be able to sort of sit down and have a conversation with you again. Pioneer a lot of what I implement and what I really teach to my athletes. So it was great to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Like I said, it's amazing these conversations. Like I said, an hour. We've been on an hour and 9 minutes. It goes by so fast.
Yeah. Like that's why I love this because like I get to sit down with coaches and like Thomas Newman, he was on for 3 hours. I've had people on for two. It's just like a great way to learn and sort of go back and forward on how this industry is going and how we can be better as coaches too.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's why I do them.
No, thank you so much. Peace.